All right, Chillcast MMA, and I'm joined by Austin Brody of MMAPanic. And it's been a while since we did one of these. Been a couple days, so just figured we check in on the world of MMA, talk about some topics, a lot of interesting things going on. So right off the bat, Austin, how are things? How are you? Happy New Year, all that good stuff. What's going on?
Yeah, all's good. You got a slow couple weeks coming up in the MMA world. No fights of any real relevance going on until the Connor card. So a nice slowdown to the beginning of the year.
Yeah, it's definitely slow right now, but as always, there's like a lot of small topics, a lot of small stuff going on. So we can, I guess, just talk about that, or we can talk about some fights. As always, as far as fight announcements, that's always on the regular. It seems like every other day fights get announced. So, in that note, the latest one to get announced or at least I'm hyped about it. And I guess it's a little bit slow, so we might as well just bounce around. Why not start with it? But Curtis Blades, he's taking on JDS. When you hear that matchup, what's your instant reaction?
Oh yeah, I really like it. I mean, obviously, it's a top ranked heavyweight matchup. Former world champion in Junior Dos Santos, but I like it. Curtis Blades at his best looks like the best heavyweight in the world, and this obviously the same can be said about Junior Dos Santos. Like when he's on, especially with his striking, his boxing, like he looks like a world beater, and he has been a world beater. He's proved it. So yeah, this is an awesome fight. It's good to see JDS, out of the hospital, recovered from I forget what it was, but I know he was forced to pull out of his last fight and had some like serious type of illness, I think it was. So it's good to see him back. It's going to be a fun matchup, and I don't know if it'll have any sort of title implications. I don't think so, but it'll definitely an impressive win. Will put one of these guys right back on the track to get up close to it.
Yeah, my initial reaction is JDS, please don't get drowned. Because Curtis Blades is going to go for that double. And I guess that's my instant reaction. I just want to see how JDS deals with that if it goes that long. Because Curtis Blades, we all know his chin isn't made out of granite. So it's interesting from that perspective. But boy, do I feel bad for JDS if he ends up on his back in this one. I guess we can talk about some other fight announcements a little bit later on. But there's a lot of little small topics, so we might as well start from the top and sort of work our way back. Dana White, he recently said an interview about matchmaking. What's his biggest matchmaking miss, basically? What's the one fight that he wishes he would have made? The one fight that he missed out on. And obviously, as fans, we have our ones. For me, it will be Anderson Silva versus GSP. I would love to hear what yours is, but he said it was Fedor Emelianenko versus Brock Lesnar. And, usually with these Dana interviews, it's pretty black and white. It's really vanilla. There's not really too much you can pull. But every now and again, he'll drop a gem. And for me, there's one specific paragraph that I want to focus in on. It's towards the end, and this is transcribed via MMA Junkie. He said, "We were in deep talks with Emelianenko." And he said this in January 2013. He said, "We were that close to signing recently, right before his dad died. We were right there when I was talking about doing the big Dallas, Texas stadium show. It was going to be Brock Lesnar versus Fedor." So that's him saying it. And he follows up with that and says, "Remember when I met with him and said it didn't go well? It actually went well. It went well, and Brock wanted to fight Fedor. Then Fedor's dad died, and he was done." So obviously, if you've been following the sport of MMA, you know that's a complete conflict and a straight up lie compared to what he said all these years prior to this comment coming out. So what's your instant reaction to this? Like, I don't feel this is too crazy to say we caught Dana with his hand in the cookie jar on this one.
Yeah, we had talked about this a little bit before going on, and you had pointed out to me that quote because I didn't even notice it. I was just thinking about the matchmaking thing. But yeah, that's such an obvious. He even admits in the news statement, like, you remember when I told you it wasn't going good? Well, it actually was. So, and like you said, if you're an MMA fan, you remember that interview, that famous interview where he was called Fedor's manager of the dummy and talked about how they had a piece of the money burning business or whatever it was. And now he's coming out and saying, no, it was fine. He just had personal issues, which is something we all would have been able to understand. If you back then, if he would have came out and said, yeah, we were close to signing Fedor, but he has his dad passed and he's not in the right mindset to be fighting, we would all understood that. But instead, you made it seem like he was more greedy than he was. But I mean, is anyone surprised I mean, that's the thing. I mean, he does this over and over and over again. He'll do it. This was like 6 years or 7 years in the making or whatever it was, but he's done it within months, being like, Brock Lesnar's never going to come back. He comes back a month later. Like, he lies constantly. It's just, I don't know if that's just part of being Dana White or part of being a fight promoter in the world, but yeah, it shocked me that uh, I don't think realized that he admits that he straight up lies to the media, but it doesn't shock me that he did lie to the media. When we know he does that all the time, you can't trust anything he says.
It just, again, for anyone that's been, I guess covering or just been around MMA for a while, um, you know that Dana White is he lies. It's not. I don't feel crazy going out and saying that. I don't feel like I'm putting my neck out there by saying that Dana White has been caught lying as a promoter. And other promoters, they definitely do it too. Doesn't really give Dana White a pass. And I don't want to turn this into that discussion, a sort of deep dive on all that. All that has been well documented as far as Dana and what he says behind the mic. But it's just sort of interesting, right? Because it just lets you know when we hear these fighters come out and they say things to defend themselves from Dana White, even now, I feel like it's tempered compared to, let's say, last decade or the decade before that, as far as the fans piling on the fighters. I feel like the fans listen to the fighters now when they say that fight negotiations don't go well or UFC did them dirty. And we know via the antitrust lawsuit that fighters aren't getting a fair shake. Like, we actually have solid numbers to say that now. So, like, I just want to throw it back to you. When you see that, again, it's just another obvious lie that was, I mean, you can say what you want, but there's a conversation to be had about what damage they did to Fedor, and it was a lie. I don't know. Like, is there anything we can draw from that from the future? Like, should we give these guys more leeway to where we really should question it more so that way other fighters don't have their reputation damaged because Dana White just has a hot moment in front of a mic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should. We should give fighters a benefit of the doubt more. A recent example of this is going on right now. With someone asked Dana White, I think it was Brett Okamoto. He asked Dana White why Connor's fighting Cowboy and not Justin Gaethje, and he made some sort of statement like, "Oh, trust me, we've been offering Gaethje fights, and he turns them all down," or something similar to that. And then when they asked Gaethje about it, he's like, "I'm completely confused. Like, I haven't turned down any fights." And us as a viewers, like, just by the way he fights and the way he is, we know Justin Gaethje's not turning down fights left and right. Like, I mean, maybe it's out. It goes to his manager Ali, and then he turns it down, and Justin Gaethje doesn't even know about it. It could be a miscommunication there. But how many times have when we've complained or the media's complained about like this guy getting a shot over this guy, has Dana White said, "Well, we offer him fights constantly. He always turns them down." I mean, that was the thing about the Diaz brothers. He said it about Tony. He said it about Verdum. He said it about everybody. So that makes you wonder, like, that's kind of his go-to for not really having an answer to. And what that does is, it's so crazy because it's not just a lie to get out. It is just a lie to get out of the question being asked. But what you're doing, like you said, you're defacing your talent. Like, you're making it seem like they're scared to fight when they're the best fighters in the world who aren't. Like, it's cutting off your nose to spite of your face, or whatever that saying is. Like, you're getting out of a short term question when you could just simply say Connor's fighting Cowboy, or in any of these cases, because it's a better matchup and we want to give him some steam. Like, you could say that, we respect it, but instead you have to start shitting on Justin Gaethje for no reason. It makes no sense. And like you said, we need to start giving the fighters more benefit of the doubt. I think a lot of people are good about that, as far as what Dana says, but you see a lot of people take that as the gospel and then start saying Justin Gaethje's ducking fights and stuff, which is, I mean, that's beyond ludicrous.
It's just unfortunate because, again, like, we sit here and I feel like other people that are actually listening to this, chances are if you are listening to this, you're aware of some of the other things that go around in the sport. And we can sit here and have this conversation, but nonetheless, Conor McGregor, does something. Dana White just puts out a statement and it just pretty much dies. And what you said about Justin Gaethje is true. So I don't want to, double down on that when you just laid it out perfectly. But it's just interesting because Dana White could come out and, he could slam Joanna for something random. And it's just people take it at face value. The people that, I guess, when Dana talks about moving the needle, he's also referring to the people that listen to him when he slams fighters. So I guess that's sort of a correlation ultimately I'm trying to draw from this. But yeah, if you've been banging the drum on this, just continue to bang the drum, and this is just another reminder to just speak up about it. I guess ultimately that's all you really can do at the end of the day. But moving on, like I said in the beginning, fight announcements, they're trickling in. So Nick Lentz, he sits at 30, 10, and 2 with one no contest. He's taking on Ned Narimani, 12 and 3, UFC Raleigh, January 25th. This is an interesting fight for me, at least for Nick Lentz, because I know that he was on a 2-fight win streak, but then he lost to Charles Oliveira. I don't really know. Admittedly, until I do more research on this one, I don't know too much about Narimani. I do know that he lost to Mike Grundy. I remember watching that one, but I have to go back and actually see about it. But I do know that the reason why everyone was hype on him was because of his fight with Paddy Pimblett. So I do at least know that much. But any reactions to this fight or not much? You want to just keep it moving?
I'm with you. I don't know a ton about Amari or Matt Mariani or whatever besides his last fight. But for Nick Lentz, he seems like he usually can go on winning streaks and look pretty impressive. And then when he gets towards like the top of the division or like a ranked guy, it kind of exposes him and he kind of gets outclassed. So maybe that we'll be seeing the start of that right here, where he gets a guy still trying to work his way up in the UFC, and we could really see him shine, or the opposite, and it could we can make a name for this other guy. So yeah, it's a decent matchup. When is that one?
That's going to be January 25th. So right down the road, it's going to be after the Conor McGregor card. And we know that there's usually a little bit of a trickle-down effect as far as viewership. So who knows? If he goes out there and does something spectacular, or if a major upset happens with Narimani, who knows what can happen moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. It was Nick Lentz maybe isn't the funnest fighter at times because the way he wins is more of a grinding style, but we're not talking about a main event or anything. It's just it should be a good filler fight for one of these fight night cards.
Yep. So moving ahead, like I said, a lot of things have happened over the past week, and it is a little bit slow. So every now and again, try and open up and have a little bit of a different discussion. And I guess one of the things that I wanted to talk about and just sort of gloss over, and this is going to be open ended because we don't really know as of yet, but the NCAA, we all know that college pay, as far as what athletes make, that's been a conversation over the past year for other sports as far as basketball and your football. But a law came down, and it's taking effect in California, but other states are projected to pick it up as well. And obviously, the conversation is about them because they're quote unquote the needle movers. But why I bring this up for MMA is because we saw Bellator sign Ed Ruth, and Ed Ruth was a wrestler at Penn State. I'm sort of wondering if that rule does apply to college athletes, and college wrestling is obviously a huge thing and it drives revenue as far as the sport as a whole. College wrestling in America is the hotbed as far as where dollars are made on a consistent basis throughout the wrestling season. So I just want to throw back to you, since this is a law now and it's going to start applying to all college athletes, if you're a college wrestler and you've seen the Ed Roots and the Aaron Picos and various other guys, we just mentioned Justin Gaethje, he wrestled in college, Brock Lesnar, all these guys, DC, we can go on and on. What do you think this new law and new rule, how will they approach it, do you think?
Admittedly, I'm not that well versed on collegiate wrestling, that world of what's going on. So you'll know a lot better than I will. But yeah, I think it'll, like you said, that law is for everyone. And that law was that college athletes can hire agents and start looking for like marketing deals or endorsement deals or something like that. And that will apply to wrestling too, for sure. Like you said, like it may be more of a niche market than say college football or basketball, but it has a hardcore fan base. It has people, and it has big corporations that are interested in it, like A6, I think, right? So there'd be a lot of like I gotta assume like a Jordan Burroughs, someone to that stature would have no problem getting an endorsement deal with one of these companies that make wrestling equipment, or even a bigger one like Nike or something like that. So yeah, I see it going everywhere anywhere where a company can realize we can sell something by using this athlete, which I think will extend to a lot of sports other than just football and basketball for sure.
For me, I tend to look at it like one of the big strikes, or one of the scarlet letters when people talk about wrestling or MMA, is that there's no proper feeder system for it, or there's no solid way for the guys on the come up, or even just wrestlers outside of the Olympic circuit, to make sustainable money. And I just feel like with this law, it just opens up another avenue. If it does for basketball and football players, and there's language in it that says it applies to all athletes, then if you're a wrestler, let's say I'm a Nico Megaludis, and I'm getting recruited to Penn State, and let's say they have an exclusive deal with Nike, and I know I'm going to be the front man, and if they're filling out their arena with 16K and they're doing articles on it and all that, so they're clearly making money off of it, and they want people to know that, and that's fine. But now, as the athlete, let's say I'm the face of the roster during my redshirt season, now I have the ability to go to a Nike, or I have a pipeline to be able to go to Nike, or a platform to be able to finally be able to leverage that and get my own deal. So I feel like that just brings in more stuff. But one thing, and again, this is just an open-ended conversation, but I just wonder about conflict of interest, because say I do get signed by Nike, but ultimately the UFC comes a call in, and they have this Reebok deal, or I know that's expiring soon, but they have an outfitting policy that's going to bring up questions about conflict of interest. That's just going to add a new wrinkle to the story, but I do think we are years away from that becoming a real talking point, but it's just something to look out for. But again, just, do you have any more thoughts of it? It's not really something that I've seen too much conversation about, because I know it mainly, or people are mainly talking about it in the confines of basketball and football, but it does apply to all college athletes. And if we saw Ed Ruth sign a deal, or at least a developmental deal with Bellator, then you got to think one of these guys are going to scoop a little manager. Let's say a Malky Kawa. He can now dip his hand on the college circuit and grab, again, like a Jordan Oliver or a Jordan Burroughs in college, Nebraska, one of these Oklahoma guys or whoever, and maybe leverage them a little deal for $50,000 a year. I mean, I guess I don't really know I don't really have a question, but I guess just, do you have any more thoughts or anything when you hear me say that? Am I making any sort of sense or not? Or is there anything else you're sort of thinking? Just anything at all about this?
Yeah, the interesting thing was the outfitting policy of the UFC. I never thought about that, but we have seen them run into that sort of problem with GSP. Remember, he had endorsement deal with Under Armour, a long-standing deal with Under Armour, and then retired, came back, and there was the outfitting policy, and then he has to wear Reebok. And I think that made that deal take longer. I don't totally remember, but I think that made that deal take a lot longer than what it should have. And in the end, they were able to get it done. And maybe you can answer this. I don't know if George St. Pierre is still sponsored by Under Armour, and they just let him go ahead and fight that, or if he had to kind of end his endorsement with them. But yeah, that's definitely something to think about with this whole thing too.
If I believe, and obviously anyone that knows for sure can correct me, but I do believe he kept the deal, and it was just out of cage. So like when he had his retirement presser, what was he wearing? He was wearing a clean little Under Armour get up. So I do think it was still like that, and I do think it's still going on. I guess since we're just trying to air this out a little bit, if you're Scott Coker, wouldn't that add a little bit leverage to your negotiations? Because you're not UFC, and you could say, hey, if you guys are coming out of college with deals, sign with Bellator, you can keep it. Or because of the fact that you're on our radar, you can leverage that to then get a deal. Is that something that can start to move the needle as far as fighter pay? Is that a small solution at all, or just what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it does, and I think we've seen that. We're talking about now with athletes coming out of college, particularly wrestling, but we've seen that with people in the UFC that were fighting. We're like, look, I'm going somewhere where I can get sponsorships, especially you're talking about making that, if you're a college athlete that has a sponsorship, making that transition to professional fighting as easy as possible would be someone like Bellator, who doesn't have that sort of outfitting policy, and you can just walk on in with your sponsors and wear whatever you want. So yeah, that'll definitely help them out a lot. And it's in like you said, it will help them. It has to with negotiations, because you're talking about, we now have people with other revenues of income, and that has to drive the price up more because they don't have to do it. So yeah, I think that's good for the sport. Good for Bellator.
Yeah, I'm all for it. This conversation has been going on, but there's not too much conversation about it in terms of, you know, wrestling for these guys coming out of college, and it's just going to be interesting to see if deals do start getting signed with the basketball and football players. I got to think there's going to be a guy on the wrestling team, or say there's a case where if you're a wrestler and on the football team, maybe you don't walk away from the match so fast for football because you know, hey, maybe I can get the Nike one for football, but there is some money out there with wrestling because these guys can actually pay me now. Like you said, Asics is one that's huge. I would got to think, you know, yeah, Reebok and Nike, they're going to be active as well. But if you're Asics, you got to think with wrestling, that's my hotbed. That's where I'm going to make my money and my dollars. So I would scoop up these top 10 guys from these major programs. So, like I said, that was just another little side thing, a little small topic that came up, or it's been out there, but just wanted to talk about it in terms of what that could possibly mean for MMA in the long run. But like we said and we talked about, we're going to be doing sort of a 3-part thing on the Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone fight. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but nonetheless, the card, it's there. We can talk about pay-per-view buys, we can talk about how thin we think it is. We can take this any which way you want to go. But I want to sort of talk about the actual card for a little bit, since we're obviously doing a separate thing on the main event. But obviously, it's going to be headlined by Conor McGregor. He's taking on Donald Cerrone. That's January 18th, 2020, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. But the co-main event, Anthony Pettis, he's taking on Diego Ferreira, who sits at 16-2. Pettis, 22-9. So, any thoughts on that fight? You got not asking for the deepest analysis, but just, you know, fight's been out there. It's been announced for a while. So, as the fight draws closer, any thoughts on it at all?
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. One quick thought though is, I actually think, I don't know if this is confirmed or not, but I actually think I seen on Twitter that the UFC switched it and made the co-main event Holly versus Raquel Pennington. I'm not sure. I just seen that on Twitter. I didn't go check it because it was right before we did this, so I'm actually not sure about that. But the Anthony Pettis Ferreira fight, it's a good fight. It's a kind of a weird fight for Pettis, who's had some really notable fights as of late. You know, whether it's Ferguson or why am I blanking? Oh, it's Wonder Boy or Nate Diaz. You know, he's had some real high profile fights. And then this one's kind of a step back, and maybe they're doing that to give him some juice going into whatever is next in his career. So it's a better matchup for him than what he's had in the past, and we've seen him do very well in some of these big matchups, especially, you know, the Wonder Boy knockout, stuff like that. That was crazy.
Before I give my thoughts on that fight, we mentioned it if anyone listened to the first part of the Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone part. And again, you can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speaks. You can find Austin at MMAPanic. But we mentioned Holly Holm, or I said if the Conor McGregor versus Donald Cerrone fight actually does fall through, that I would move the Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington fight to the main event. Do you think that, and if that is true that they made it the co-main event, are they setting the contingency plan, just in case, you know, risk mitigation, if you want to call it that, just in case something goes down with Conor? Do they know something? And again, because we're in the dark on that, I'm going to keep talking about it because it's not put to bed yet. So are they setting the bed for that, or am I, you know, conspiracy theorists too much, slow it down, and it's just about Q rating?
I honestly don't know. I think that should have been the co-main event of this card, because I think Holly Holm probably has a bigger name than Anthony Pettis at this point. I mean, I know she hasn't done good in world title fights as of late, but she's the one that dethroned Rousey, and we all still remember that head kick. But it wasn't at first. It was the Tony or the Anthony Pettis fights, and then they changed it. I don't know if that was because of what you're saying, which is very possible, or if it's because of just hearing kind of some of the backlash online about how weak this card is, and they're like, all right, maybe we should switch it up to make it seem like it's more stacked with star power. I'm not sure. It's kind of a weird call. It's a weird call to do. It just seems like something you should have done from the beginning, or just not. It's not that big of a deal to do it now, unless there is something more going on, like what you're saying. Like, man, maybe they're preparing for for if something happens to Conor or Cowboy. But if that's the case, I gotta think they take it off of pay per view. I mean, if the Conor fight falls through and it's Holly Holm versus Raquel Pennington for as the main event, I don't know if they have the infrastructure set up to just do that, to just switch it. But I gotta think that turns into a fight night. You can't. Nobody's paying for that.
Yeah, so I gotta just think that if something happens and the other shoe drops, they're gonna just run Holly Holm out there, have her do the media thing, and just proceed as normal. So that's what I think as far as that. But hopefully, if we're not gonna get clarity, at least let this thing go smoothly. But it's gonna be interesting to see what happens because, like you said, infrastructure things like that. I don't know, but I gotta think if I'm ESPN, you're like, no, let's try and squeeze every dollar out of this, and let's set the bed now just in case. So that's what I'm thinking about that. But again, we got Anthony Pettis. He's taking on Diego Ferreira. I'm going with Pettis on that one. I just got to go with the veteran on that. I just got to go with the veteran on that one, and it's going to be interesting to see because for me, this, and I guess we might as well go into it. But to me, this feels like this is Pettis's last year of relevance. Like if he has another 1-2, 2-1, but the one is really weird year. Like if he has another year like that, I think you got to start thinking about either exiting the UFC or having an exit plan as far as MMA goes. That's just for me because with Pettis, we've seen him get hot and cold for a couple years now. And if he has another year like that when he's just getting older, I just don't know if like I know the fans aren't everything, but I just don't know if he's going to want to keep going through this grind if he's just going to keep being a slightly above 500 fighter. So I guess when you hear me say that, any thoughts at all?
Yeah, I agree. One real quick question: what was this fight? What weight class is this? Is this a welterweight or is it lightweight? Probably, I assume welterweight, because that's an interesting thing too. Because we've seen him kind of bounce back and forth between three weight classes in the last 5 or so years, where he's kind of looking to like get his footing and like get some real momentum in the divisions that he's in. And it seems like he starts to, and he starts to really rise up, and then something happens and he just falls all the way back down. In featherweight when he went up against Miss Weight, and then he went up against Holloway. Lightweight, it's happened before, and same thing with welterweight. He had that incredible knockout over Wonder Boy that got a lot of people excited about him in the division, and then drops the decision to Diaz. So he seems to like he'll start to get the ball rolling, and then it'll kind of crap out. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying 100%.
Yeah, and admittedly, I don't know which weight group it is. I was just assuming it was at welterweight as well. But like you said, the wins and losses, it's like he's been doing this all the way back to 2017, which you laid out. And really further back than that, but I guess for me, that's when it really started to set in. It was that loss to Dustin Poirier, in my opinion, that started it. And to go out there and have an impressive fight against Chiesa, and then you follow that up with the weird loss with Tony Ferguson, and then your hands broken. It was just weird. It's just weird, and I don't know if I can go through another year of that as an Anthony Pettis fan. So I guess that's just how I'm looking at it. But again, this was just a more laid back episode, just sort of bouncing some topics around. So I guess before we get out of here, was there anything else, anything under the radar that you noticed? Any other small topic going on in MMA, fight announcements you want to talk about, anything like that?
Yeah, one last thing on the last topic. That fight with Anthony Pettis is at lightweight, so that means he's dropping back down again, which is kind of weird. And I think from this thing I'm looking at, it says that from the UFC site, it says that the co-main event is the Holly Holm fight. So it looks like they did go ahead and make that move, which is interesting. That both of those are interesting because it's interesting that Pettis is dropping back down to lightweight, and that it got moved out of the main event. But yeah, the one of the last topics I was that got brought up yesterday that I was wanting to talk to you about was Eddie Hearn, the boxing promoter, of guys like Anthony Joshua and stuff like that. He was doing an interview and said that he would like for the DAZN monthly price to be $50, which I can only imagine would immediately implode that app. What do you think about that? Like, how is it as uh, bad of an idea as I think it is?
Thank you, Austin. This was going chill. We were having a nice, relaxing combo. We were going to get out of here. This was going to be real relaxed. This was going to be an easy upload. And then you brought this up, and it slipped my mind. And then you brought it up. So I'm so glad that you did, because I had so many thoughts. Okay, let's just start from the beginning. For a boxing promoter to come out and make a suggestion about what an app should do, you already done messed up because you don't understand your role in the boardroom. For you to make a suggestion about lowering or raising the price on the app, how much power do you think you have with the zone? That's one. Two, for you to, and they already had to raise the price twice since the app came out. The app is barely a year old, and for you to suggest that they should more than double that for a monthly fee, and your reasoning behind it is because you feel like you're giving quality content and you want the fans to stick around. That's the point of having an app. That's the point that when they came to you with various negotiations and they go to the various boxers and talk about getting you on the app, that's one of the things that they talk about, is that we have other content that is going to bolster the service that they're providing on the app, and they want you to be a part of it, and that's why they're cutting you the check for you. And so for you to come out and say that you want to more than double it, again, how much power do you think you have? Just if I'm looking at it from the app provider's perspective, but then also, how much money do you think the fans have? Are we just going to talk about that basic point? And again, this is an app. So like $50 a month, that's more than Netflix, that's more than iTunes, that's more than Tidal. You're talking about a legitimate bill. That's on the heights of YouTube TV. DAZN is not YouTube TV when they can't even promise you that if you stream a Bellator event live, which by the way, they have hard times reminding the fans about it if you're a subscriber, but yet they can tell you about every boxing fight that's going on, and they can tell you about all these cricket events and all that. And we all know that they're trying to get some of these new broadcasting rights, so maybe a price inflation is on the way. But for you to come out and say, you know what, we had a couple big fights on DAZN, never mind the fact that you caved to the UFC and pushed and made Canelo upset by pushing his fight back, and now you want to more than double it because you felt like you. We can't even get to the meat of this because I'm still stuck on the fact that he actually fixed his lips to say that. So before we really get to the meat and bones of the problem, which is this is not going to happen if they do, subscriptions are going to plummet. I know they added over 200,000 over the past year, still behind ESPN Plus, and ESPN Plus saw a dip and they charge $5 a month, and now they're rolling out Disney Plus, and so now DAZN, you're going to have to crank out more content, and you have a boxing promoter that goes out there and says the sentiment when you're trying to advertise online and get fans to sign up online. You have a boxing promoter that has a comment floating out online to the same consumer base that you want to more than double it, and you don't come out and deny it. Boy, is this a PR headache. So before I continue, do you have anything else to say on this?
No, I mean I completely agree. I think it's ridiculous. I almost thought it was one of those fake accounts that put that out. I was like, in what world is that okay? Like ESPN, this is just my personal preference, but ESPN Plus is just such a better deal than DAZN already. And what is the quality content that he's putting out that other fight related apps aren't putting out? Like what, Logan Paul versus KSI, is that the content that we should have to be paying $50 a month for? That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I want these fighters to get paid as much as they can, and I know DAZN has cut some pretty big checks, so I'm grateful for that. But the in a world where people are going more towards free content and stuff, you want to charge $50 a month is ridiculous. I mean, that's pretending like your fights are pay per view. Like, I don't know. I'm not a big DAZN guy as it stands, but I would never pay $50 a month. That's for sure.
Title. They had this problem when they brought out the app. They were charging I believe it was $12 a month, whereas Apple was 10, SoundCloud was free, YouTube is free. So they were having a problem. They didn't jack the price completely up to $25, $50, $30. All they did was get more content on it. They actually, if you look at the different distribution sites for music that pay out, Tidal is in the top 3. They didn't compromise on what they were providing to the fans. They just kept it as it was and added more content, so the subscriber rate went up. So I don't know what that means in terms of boxing, but you don't simply double the price and then, more than double the price. You don't simply do that. So it's just stupid to even put that out there, especially when you know from a PR and marketing standpoint, when you say things like that, just saying that alone is going to make roughly 1,000 or so people unsubscribe or not want to renew because they think it's coming down the pipeline. Because again, I'm turning to you, DAZN, on this one. You did not come out and deny it. That is bad PR, especially when you're dealing with fickle fans, and you're dealing with paywalls, and you have competition out there that's offering arguably a better service for half the price, less than half the price. So these are the sort of problems that you run into, and for Eddie Hearn, once again, to fix his mouth and say that publicly, it just shows you the state of affairs in this digital era. So do you think it means anything for MMA? Or, am I blowing hot smoke? Am I overreacting? I should shut up? I guess to put a bow on this, how do we put a bow on this?
Yeah, I don't think you're overreacting. I'm right there with you. And I think every MMA fan, when they saw that, they had the exact same reaction we're having. Maybe not the exact same, but I just, like you said, what is he trying to, I don't understand what he's trying to do. You just made yourself very unlikable that you think that, your content is so premium that we should be paying 5 times whatever for it and stuff like that, instead of doing what you were saying and just being all right, we got to get the subscribers up. Not we got to gouge the subscribers we have, the ones that have been loyal to us. We got to gouge them for all the money they have. It makes no sense. Like you said, DAZN should have came out and been we have no plans of ever doing anything like this, and I don't think they would. I honestly think it's suicide. I would say the same thing about ESPN Plus. If they went up to $50 a month, I would be like, no one's going to do that. Who's going to pay $50 a month for a random fight night, maybe once or twice a month, and especially if you're an MMA fan on DAZN, you got it's the main one's Bellator. I know they have KSW and some other ones like that, but Bellator, how often does Bellator have just a fight night card that's on just DAZN? It's usually, a lot of them are on Paramount, and a lot of the ones that are on DAZN aren't the best fight cards of all time, dude, if I'm being just completely honest. So yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know how to put a ball on it. The only thing I can say is I don't think DAZN would ever do that, but not because of good faith, just because I think it's just a overall dumb thing to do. But we've seen crazier things, that's for sure.
For me, to wrap it up, we saw this with SoundCloud, and when you punish the people that support your platform in this digital space, when you charge the content creators, and the content creators for SoundCloud, that was their base, the producers, the 15, 16-year-olds. But when you start charging them $10, $15 to upload content, and then you enter YouTube, a platform that is free and offers roughly the same services as far as messaging and mechanics and all that stuff, and I don't want to start breaking all that down, but when that becomes a reality, people are going to obviously opt out, and then that begins the slow downfall of SoundCloud. And this is a situation where you do not want to punish the base, the combat sport fans, for trying to participate and follow the sport. You don't want to do that, because once you do, those 200,000, that 200,000 number that you touted will dip in the same way that for ESPN, when they touted that 2 million number, less than 1 month later, when they had the UFC for the laser card, it was Jose Aldo versus Renato Moicano. They lost roughly 500,000 subscribers in less than 3 weeks' time. They didn't come back out and announce that number, and that is, again, public data. That's not insider info. If you have access to, say, a Keyhole or any analytics site, yes, they were able to get the number back up, but the dip did happen. And if you more than double the price when you're already sitting around the $20 mark, trust me, it will happen to you too. So I guess sort of that's my final thoughts on that. But with that, I don't have another under the radar. I feel like that just ended it perfectly. So before we get out of here, anything else you feel like we missed or want to go over?
Yeah, one last thing is that I wanted to bring up. If there's anything that that's going on in MMA that I want to be, and there's a lot of things, but if there's one thing that I want to just be left in 2019 and to not follow into 2020, it's the Bellator post limbs. It makes no sense in the world. Their timing on their prelims has always been off. Like they don't know how much time they have and how much time the fights take. So like you might get 5, you might get 6, you might get 7. It doesn't matter. And the ones that they don't get to, they play after the main event. And it's just so frustrating and annoying as someone who's trying to cover the sport and someone who's trying to pay attention to all these fights and write about them and stuff. It makes no sense to me that you build this whole fight card up to the main event and then you have 3 people that you couldn't get to earlier, which is just I don't know how they can't do it when every other fight company in the world could do it, or maybe they're choosing not to do it for extra content. I don't know what they're doing, but to me, post limbs is beyond annoying. And I want to know, if there's one thing in MMA of the last year that you hope doesn't follow into this year, what would that thing be?
MMA media complaining about other MMA media. Stop it. You guys are all doing the same job from various angles. In the NBA, there are all types of personalities, and those guys banter about each other all the time. Rob Parker, who's analyst for Fox Sports Radio, just yesterday I was listening to his podcast, to the Odd Couple podcast, and he said on it to his producer, he said, turn off that Will Kane podcast. If this was MMA and you heard Luke Thomas in the middle of his podcast say to his producer, turn off that Brett Okamoto interview, people would lose their minds. If the fans just chill out, the media will chill out. Trust me, we're all going to get along. There's enough content for everyone. MMA is not in the basement sport anymore.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of it's like that famine mentality thinking and like jealousy and all that weird stuff about human nature. But yeah, like we can all have fun and just give our opinions. Not everybody has to be right or lined up with the exact same way you think or the way you want to handle the way you cover the sport or do media. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so that's it for me. But again, before we get out of here, Austin, let the people know where they can find you. Social media, website, anything like that.
Yeah, on Twitter at MMAPanic, and then the website is MMAPanic.com.
All right, you heard it there. Find Austin on Twitter at MMAPanic. Once again, that's Austin on Twitter at MMAPanic. You can find me on Twitter at Nixon_speaks. And I'll see you guys later on in the week.